Good morning and thank you for joining us. My name is Ilana and I'm the marketing manager here at Church House, Westminster. You're joining us live from our virtual studio in the Abbey Room. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the sixth session of our event series, Navigating the Next Golden Age of Events. Today, we are exploring well-being, specifically for event organizers. And I'm really excited to be joined by three panelists. They're all experts in their respective fields. First up, Chris Pinner. He's the founder of InnerFit, and he's conducted a global webinar series for a worldwide broadcaster. He's led executive-level coaching programs and ran over 500 client one-to-one sessions. He specializes in sharing practical tips to help people feel and work well. It's great to see you, Chris.
Thanks, Lana. Good to see you too.
Lindsay Taylor is Director of Park Lane Events with over 20 years industry experience. Lindsay specializes in sales and marketing, consultation with venues, venue finding hotels and venues throughout the UK and Europe for London-based event buyers, plus hosting and attending various networking events in London. Hi, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Andrew Johnson has been a wellbeing coach for over 25 years. He's also created a program of podcasts on Now Pause, the mental health initiative for the hospitality industry. A warm welcome all the way to Edinburgh.
Thank you, Ilana. Grateful to be here.
It's great to see you. I'm excited to hear your thoughts. So, if you want to, at this stage, our panelists, you can pop your web links to your organizations in the chat. So our attendees can save that as bookmarks. We're going to do a short poll. If you can use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. So the first one is, how are you feeling today? So if you do sort of a smiley face for feeling your best and a sad face for not feeling quite 100%. Let's see what we're getting. Right, got some smiles there. Brilliant. And then we're going to ask as a second question, do you have measures in place to actively manage your well-being? So once again, use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. Yes as a thumbs up and no as a thumbs down. Brilliant. So, Chris, I'm going to hand over to you. You're going to do a short physical activity, and we're really looking forward to see what you've got for us today.
I am indeed. I feel like to open up, probably just sharing the idea that I probably caused you guys a bit of stress before this in classic fashion with regards to events. You've obviously got to be on top of a lot of stuff, and at the last minute, anything can change. And I was trying to log in using the wrong password. So big thanks to you guys for making this all still seem seamless until I told everyone about it. So yeah, just to get some oxygen flowing, some blood moving, some stress levels down potentially. I'm just going to start to roll my wrists around. Guys, feel free to join me. There we go. Beautifully demonstrated. I'm just going to start to twist my, sitting up straight a little bit, just twist to the left, nice and soft. Twist it out to the right. It's so easy to spend our entire day not really moving much at all, to be honest with you. So this is the type of thing that one of the physios at InnerFit would encourage people to do at the start of one of her sessions. I'm just going to start to shake out those hands. Right arm comes across the body. Left arm comes across the body. And we're just going to open up that chest and back a little bit. So my arms are going to come out to the side. I'm just going to come forwards. And then I'm going to bring them back. Nice and easy looking up. So none of this is strenuous. Coming forwards. And back, nice and easy. One more of those coming forwards and back. Last 5 seconds. Just going to freelance for 4, 3, 2, and 1. Beautiful. There we go. Hope everyone's feeling a little bit more energized. Feel free to use that as often as you want.
Thanks, Chris. That was brilliant. I'm going to kick off our Q&A. Please feel free to pop in questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll try to accommodate as many questions as possible. Event planning, as we know, is one of the most stressful jobs on earth. It's up there with firefighters, police officers, pilots, and military personnel. Lindsay, you know from experience just how challenging it can be to achieve that perfect balance between stress and performance in our industry. How do you keep a check on your mental health, especially now that we are returning to more in-person events? And have you made any changes to your lifestyle? And how do you balance work and having an actual life?
Yeah, that's always the big question, isn't it? About getting that perfect life balance. And I think not using the word perfect for a start is a good way. And I always use an 80-20. So at least if I can do 80% of it, then I think I'm doing enough that's going to keep me sane. Time management is a massive tool that we all have that we could probably all use a bit more. I've got family as well, so it is about categorizing everything in my day as we would with an event and our day-to-day life. So we are probably experts at doing it for everybody else, but not so much for ourselves. So we definitely have to register and check in with ourselves and how am I managing myself today, and am I looking after myself, and have I given myself the 5 minutes that I need between all of these tasks that we're doing, just that you can breathe and keep calm and think calmly about it, which is easier said than done, obviously, when you're in the middle of an event, but it is very important to keep centered.
Brilliant. Andrew, how do you look after your mental health? And, especially if we look at the recent periods of change and transition and uncertainty that we've experienced, how do you sort of reassess your usual coping mechanisms?
Well, there's been a big shift for me in the last year with the pandemic. I've been meditating formally and informally for about 40 years. But at the start of the pandemic, I started broadcasting live meditations every morning for about 20 minutes. I'm now on day 400 of doing 2 a day. And it has refreshed and renewed my love of taking that time, 15 to 20 minutes at the start of the day, to center myself and get grounded and clear my mind. I knew that the meditations were helping people, but I didn't realize how much they were affecting me in a positive way. So as I say, just reinforcing the benefits of a daily habit of completely switching off from things has been wonderful for me. And I would encourage anyone to do that, whatever it is, whether it's walking or meditating or mindfulness or just daydreaming, just for that 15 minutes at the start of the day, rather than getting straight to it.
That makes total sense. I think if I can sort of refer to my own experiences, I've spent a lot of time just walking out in nature, and I just found, that time you're able to sort of, your mind just totally shifts from everything else, and you're able to sort of daydream, as you say, as well, and it really puts it all into perspective.
Absolutely.
Chris, you often refer to habits and how with the right motivation and mindset, Andrew has touched on habits now as well, we can make the right habits stick. How does this work, and what's the secret to this process?
Using Andrew's example is obviously something worked quite well there to get up to that level. So I'd imagine, and maybe Andrew, we can make this more a conversation, but I'd imagine it started with a strong reason why you wanted to get into meditation, or maybe even just a soft reason why. And then over time, with a bit of a surge at the beginning, you made it stick over a number of days. So there's a bit of a myth actually around habits that we can create it in maybe 30 days or 90 days or 60 days. It kind of depends on the complexity of the task. The science says that it can take anything from 18 to 257 days to form a habit. And they use this thing called the automaticity scale. I think I might be saying that wrong. Basically curves. So the more complex a challenge is, so quitting smoking, for example, might be more complex than embedding like a short meditation. That's going to be more towards your 257 days to really shift away from that habit. And likewise, I think, starting small is another thing that I've come across in the past to work well. Like we can often if Andrew said, for example, at the start, I'm going to do 400 days of consecutive meditation, to me, I'd feel really intimidated by that idea. But actually, if I apply that to my own life, I think, well, each time I'm going to flick the switch on the kettle, I'm going to do a short meditation whilst the kettle boils this week. All of a sudden, it feels a little bit more attainable, and that's kind of a little bit of my thinking on habits.
That's a really good practical tip. I like that. I may start using that today. Lindsay, we're living in an age where we are surrounded by technology, willing us to stay connected, always on. How do you manage it, and how do you make sure you unplug?
Yeah, this is so crucial at the moment, and especially with it so much being online as well, and just being drawn into everything, and with the fast pace of all the changes that have been going on over the last year and are continuing. And so with that, I would say turn notifications off for a start with everything that you have, unless it's actually for your health and well-being. So a lot of the news and the things that we're catching up on, or we think that we need to be absorbing, can wait, and then do it in bite-sized chunks. So perhaps at lunchtime, check in on Facebook, or perhaps at the end of the day, have a quick look at the news to recap, and first thing in the morning. I think everyone's guilty, myself included, of the scrolling, and you get sucked into a lot of things. So I then end up putting timers on, so that after a certain, perhaps 10 minutes, a little alarm will go off, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been on whatever for 10 minutes and I need to be cracking on with what I'm doing. But I actually went on there in the first place to look at a news article that was relevant to something that I was doing. So it's very much being aware of what the triggers are that get you lost down rabbit holes. And that again brings me back to sort of time management again, and allotting time for certain things. So checking in on your emails 3 times a day, or having an hour time block for X amount of emails, so that then you have your focus time to actually be able to get on and do that work. And again, turning all those notifications on, putting your phone on sleep mode for half an hour, just so that you can get on with that project in mind. And then you feel so much better afterwards, because you've got that achievement and that self-satisfaction. And majority of things can wait. I always say, we're not brain surgeons, we're not saving people's lives, and most things are manageable if we have that time management in control. Again, not always easier. So it is easier said than done. Another one.
I totally agree with that. And I think one of the things that, I have always said as well, like, don't reach for your phone the first thing when you wake up. Just have a normal alarm clock, so nothing to do with your phone, and, just keep that well away from you until you've had your meditation and everything else in the morning as well, because you don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Andrew, we're coming back to the last 15 months of the change that we've experienced, and was, more challenging for others, to a degree. But as a result, there was a lot of anxiety. And I've learned the other day that the impact of such stress can be latent and sometimes only be felt 3 or 4 months afterwards. What are some useful things to know when it comes to coping with change?
Well, you're absolutely right. Change and uncertainty are the 2 things that cause so much stress. And there's no doubt, I think everyone would agree, the last 15 months, there's been more change and uncertainty than probably any time since the Second World War. I think most of us go through our days holding on to stress and not really recognizing it. So I think it's really important to be able to talk to people, to be able to be upfront with people, to have good friends that you can talk to and talk it out. I think it's important to have positive habits. I think there's no doubt that for many of us who start to feel stress, it's important to recognize that we can't really change the situation short or medium term. The only control we really have is to change our reaction to it. And when we find ways, any ways, like walking in nature, as you said, or as Lindsay said, switching off the phone and not reacting to these notifications, we start to feel that we're maybe a little bit more in control of the situation. I think all of us, because of notifications, begin to think that we're much more important than we really are. And I remember I got a lesson before, maybe certainly before the pandemic. I was flying over to the States, and I decided I think it was British Airways or Virgin. I had the choice of one didn't have Wi-Fi, and I took the one without Wi-Fi. And I remember thinking, I'm going to put the phone on after 11 hours, and I'm going to be inundated. And I put the phone on, and I thought, oh my God, I'm really not that important. There was nothing that I needed to do. And sometimes we need little laughs like that to realise, wait a minute, I'm putting this pressure on myself. We can turn off our notifications. We don't have to be reacting to the pings and the pongs and the ding-dongs all the time. Things can wait. Lindsay put it so perfectly. Things can wait. The world turned and worked beautifully most of the time until about 20 years ago without these notifications. It's a different world we're living in now. We should be able to retake control of it.
That is so true. You've put it so succinctly. Chris, I wanted to ask you what your observations have been, because you deal a lot with companies and how they manage well-being in their workplaces. What observations have you made around stress in the workplace in the last few months, and what are companies doing to address it?
Yeah, I think to share some context, I suppose we're working with a global company of over 15,000 people, working with a smaller company of about 200 people. A few companies are about 800 people or 1,500 people. So in terms of observations we've made across all of them, without making a sweeping generalization, I'd say that it's definitely there. I think it has to do with a few things, and that's probably where it differs by organization. Like if I'm thinking about professional services firms, you've seen just workload feel like it's increasing. Like, this is very general, but what we've seen is I think that more work is being done at home, given the lack of structure and boundaries and lack of commute that's starting to come back into play, thankfully. There's also, I think people are getting to grips with how to communicate effectively and push back and learn that it's okay to say no, which isn't always easy if someone's putting in an 8:30 a.m. meeting or a 7 p.m. meeting if you're working globally across regions. So I think that's another cause of stress. And then I suppose it's all the other things, like the physiological stuff. If we think about what stress actually is, it's really a physiological response to either a physical thing or a psychological thing. And I guess what we've just spoken about there is it's quite psychological. And that physiological response is that the body is tensing up, the heart rate might increase, breathing rate increases, all this type of stuff. So I suppose if we're doing more work, that's kind of crowding out some of the space that we did used to have for exercise and eating well. And obviously some people are doing this stuff well, but actually a lot of us aren't managing to get out for that regular walk, which is helping reduce stress. We're not managing to have that lunch break, which helps to reduce stress, because if we're eating good foods and we're not just reliant on caffeine and sugar, which is going to spike our cortisol levels, for example, it's a bit of a cocktail, I suppose. But I think well-being wise, we're observing that some companies are doing it well. Generally, I'd say there's probably been an increase in stress, and different companies are dealing with it in different ways. And we're seeing some quite creative stuff around addressing Zoom fatigue, around connecting, but also allowing people to disconnect. But yeah, also interested in what everyone else has seen, to be honest, and what other people are doing in their daily lives, because I think each person's solution has to work for them.
That is really true. I mean, we've seen everything from some companies saying, there will be a 4-day week as opposed to a 5-day week, and all sort of creative ideas of, giving some value back. But it has been a massive change. Lindsay, if I can ask you if you practice meditation, and how do you bring mindfulness into your life, and has it helped you to flourish?
Yes, definitely. And it again is trying to make sure that you do something every day, as much as you can, and fitting it in. As I said, I've got family, and when you're running a business, it is making sure that you've got time for you as well. And as Chris said, learning to say no as well. So what I try to do, I'm using an app at the moment called Sanctuary. I'll use different apps depending what's out there, and that's really good. I do affirmations as well, so I will, not necessarily in front of a mirror because I do feel a bit self-conscious doing that, but I will say to myself, I am good enough, I am worthwhile doing this, new contract or whatever it is, or speaking at webinars and things. It's about striding forward still, and keeping that confidence in yourself, which is where sort of earlier I was saying about checking in with yourself and recentering yourself, keeping those notifications off, and saying no to things to protect yourself, because then you are protecting your home life and your work and your family, because then if you're in the right frame of mind and you're practicing all these little things that only take 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, then actually you're making a really big impact, as long as you can try and do it regularly.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Andrew, when we look at the impact of working apart over the last couple of months, I think it has brought to the fore the importance of human connection, and an intense craving for human touch or voice. What do you think leadership should learn from this going forward in order to build back better, so to say?
Gosh, I don't know. I think that's a bit out of my remit. I work mostly with individuals rather than corporates, although I'm moving into that market. But I have to say that I don't know the answer to that at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. It's been 30 years since I've worked in a corporate environment. I spend my days sitting meditating and sitting on my butt talking to people. So human connection is hugely important, obviously, and human touch is hugely important. And I think you saw a couple of weeks ago when whoever it was in the government said we're now allowed to hug people, and a lot of people took that as a joke, but in actual fact, it's massively, massively important. I think that, if I may, I can say that it's my experience that an awful lot of people used to go to work to escape the pressures of home, whether it was elderly parents or unruly children or money worries. And it was, for many people, the work was the sanctuary, even though they felt stressed there. They had a start and a finish. And I think that made sense to a lot of people. And there's been a huge amount of issue with working from home for a lot of people. Just like the variety of humans on the planet, people have different varieties of responses to how they're reacting to things. There's also a lot of people who went to work for some form of community because they were living at home themselves. It's a really difficult thing to quantify. Sorry, I can't.
No, that's fine. I just thought if we flip it on the other side and say what, if we were to think about what us as individuals working for organizations, what we would like to see happen, as we go back, because I think, Chris, as well, I think there may be some people, that may have not been so comfortable in terms of seeking help during this time as well. And my question to you, Chris, would be, what would you say to someone who is struggling right now?
Yeah, I mean, actually, well, thinking about that, I mean, maybe I'd copy Andrew's approach and say that he might be a better place to answer that one from an individual basis. But I guess from a big level, there's some interesting research by Microsoft that came out in February that showed basically a bar chart. At one end you had business leaders, and at the other end you had like kind of Gen Z, people living alone, other types of people. And the business leaders, they found that 67% of them were self-reported to be thriving, and only 33% were struggling / surviving. And then essentially that inverses and reversed at the other end of the spectrum. So people living in a flat on their own, all that type of thing. So I guess maybe the self-reflection is the place to start. Obviously you can delve into the world of like signposting to resources and finding other avenues. But yeah, I think to dovetail this answer with the leadership piece, maybe the two aren't so separate, because the first thing we'd always talk about in effective leadership on wellbeing. So what is your role as a leader when it comes to wellbeing in your team? Well, actually the first role is to look after yourself and put your own oxygen mask on first. And so we use these 3 dimensions of doing that. 1 is self-reflection, 2 is self-awareness, 3 is self-regulation. I think that self-reflection piece at the beginning is probably where the individual is going to get a little bit closer to finding their own answer, because it'd be naive and a bit ridiculous for me to say, I think you should do this, you know. I don't know if that resonates with anyone else.
Yeah. But it's so massively important to reach out to someone and speak about it, I think, as well. You know, I think so often there's that, you know, stigma that, you know, you're not allowed, or we can't really speak out in terms of how we feel, and we should keep that inside. But it's very important to just, you know, share how you're feeling. You know, it may be a couple of words, it may be, you know, as much as you can share, but it's the first step towards acknowledging, you know, what you're going through and sharing it with someone. And often what we found as well is you're not the only one going through that as well. So, you know, that helps with that sort of realization. Now, these questions are open to any of the panel, so feel free to jump in. When it comes to our relationship with work and returning to some sort of normal, whatever that may be, what are some useful ideas to reframe our thoughts?
Well, I would probably go back to what I said earlier, that it's much more important to change our reaction to what's going on, to realise that everyone, whether they look like it or not, has gone through some sort of changes over the last 12 months. I finish a lot of my meditations by saying the same words, which is be gentle with yourself and with others. And I think that that gentleness is what will help. I think we've got to give people time and space and not go straight back into the old routines we used to have, because they aren't there anymore. They're not valid. And maybe just to add, certainly it's been my experience over the last 5 or 10 years that talking about mental health is much more acceptable. Compared to 20 years ago, it's completely changed. There's still a huge amount of work to be done, but it is much more accepted, I believe, to be able to talk about the problems and the issues. I also think that it's important that we have the ability to come back to work and not have to talk about COVID. It seems to be the topic of conversation that everyone is going through, as if to share experiences. And I think it must be. I think it's really important to be able to say to people, I think we need to stop talking about this at the moment and talk about something else. I don't know if anyone else has had that same experience.
I think that's a really interesting point, because we've got to learn to live around it, so that it's always sort of going to be there in the short term. But as you say, it's about moving on, and what can we do now, and how can we support each other now, and how can we help each other now. And sharing that experience helps each other understand what we've been through, definitely. But as you say, moving forward and checking in again with each other of how can I support you, or how can I help you going forward, so that then we can just hold each other up, and knowing who your tribe is as well, I think. And as you were saying, Andrew, about talking to other people, and we are so much better at that, and I think it's getting better for men to share their experience a bit more now as well, and to be able to see therefore where we can support each other by sharing it in the first place. But then, right, moving forward, how can we keep each other up, knowing who your tribe is? And even if you're not necessarily contacting those people, but just knowing you can, or sending them a quick WhatsApp message, just say, I'm thinking of you, hope you're having a good day, catch up with you soon, kind of thing. It doesn't always have to be a reason to connect with somebody either.
Chris, did you want to add anything?
I'll go next, because I'm the one that hasn't said anything yet on this topic. The first thing that's coming into my mind, for whatever reason, is that I just feel better having been in this conversation. So thank you guys very much for that. And the second is that I'm currently rereading a book called Ego is the Enemy, by a guy called Ryan Holiday. It's really good. Like, if you haven't heard of him, check him out. He's kind of like a modern day philosopher who brings old thinking into modern language. And there's a piece in there, the chapter I just read, about how if someone's able to give you thoughts or advice or guidance, it's just always worth remembering that it's probably coming from a place of having experienced a challenge themselves, which is why they're able to say those words. And I just thought it was quite powerful, and that stuck with me a little bit, because it's easy to sit on a panel or be a coach or whatever it looks like, and for people to perceive it as, oh wow, you've got the answers, but actually it's because we're all kind of in this together, I think. So whether it's COVID and we want to talk about that in the office, or whether actually the last thing we want to talk about is COVID and we'd rather talk about something else entirely, I think that's all right. It's just, I suppose, with a bit of self-reflection, it's also like reflection on where other people might be as well, which I probably could benefit from doing a little bit more of as well myself, to be honest. So
yeah, more listening. So there was a recent study. It was a Work Life by Open Money survey that has found that 21% of employers are concerned about helping staff manage the long-term mental health impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So my question is, how can we cultivate a culture of well-being at work?
Shall I go? Sorry.
Go for
Maybe
it.
say one of our names first to kick us off. I think actually if you're on a corporate company, having a nominated person or a committee, if you've got lots of different departments as well, and at least then there's that go-to person, there's that somebody that's collecting resources and communicating those resources. And then if you like one-man band like myself, then it is being aware of it and having that little check-in and attending the odd webinar and sharing these experiences, so that then going back to that tribe thing, you've got that as well. So I think in every company there's definitely a need for this, but it's sometimes whether that there's a committee or people being paid, or is it a voluntary thing because it interests you as well. I mean, it would be wonderful to have some sort of government standard where we have HR, then there's a well-being person as well, but that's perhaps a bit idealistic at the moment.
yeah, I think that role's been, sorry Andrew, you go.
No, please carry on, Chris.
I was just piggybacking on your point, Lindsay, about the role of a well-being leader. They do exist, but they're relatively rare at the moment. But the hope would be that changes. And I think actually, as companies realise that well-being isn't just an extra bit of a job for someone in the HR team, and it does need a team. My hope would be that we start to realise kind of Kotter's 8 steps of change. So there's the kind of model. I won't go through every single step, but it begins with creating a sense of urgency, and then next couple of steps involve creating a guiding coalition and kind of enlisting your army. I think I might be getting that one wrong because it sounds a bit too aggressive, but ultimately concluding with sustaining the culture, sustaining the end point that you have in mind. And I think there's a place for the wellbeing leader in driving that. But I think, yeah, companies are starting to realize that sense of urgency kind of is there. I think as we go back into the world of work, people will see it in a different way. And I don't think the second half of the year is necessarily going to be all roses either. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges that we continue to face. And I think that sense of urgency, my hope will be that there's that guiding coalition and people start to join forces a little bit to drive the change. But we will see. I think good companies are already doing it. I think some companies that aren't doing it will get left behind. Hopefully that ties into something what you were thinking, Andrew, and we can segue beautifully across to yourself.
Thank you very much, Chris. So I was going to say, and I don't know if this is valid, but a lot of the stuff, I see my job as introducing the world of meditation and mindfulness to people who have never done so before. One of the taglines I use is all the good stuff without the woo-woo, because there's a lot of great techniques out there that people have perhaps looked at and thought, I can't do that, or it's too spiritual, or I have to sit in a cross-legged position, or whatever. And so what I do when I train people is I teach them basic relaxation skills to start off with. And what I found over the years is that the majority of people have never been taught these basic relaxation skills. So that's fine. That sounds like an advert for what I do. It's not. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that when you train people in these sort of basic skills, it gives colleagues a language that they can use with their friends and workers, fellow workmates. And what I was finding with feedback from companies was that when someone was obviously struggling, if you don't know these techniques, it's difficult for someone else to say, rather than go and have a fag or go and have a donut or go and have a coffee. When people have got techniques, no matter what they are, it gives people in that company the ability to say, why don't you go and do that breathing technique that woman taught us or that man taught us? Why don't you go and ground yourself? Why don't you go and do some relaxation? And I find that really, really powerful coming from one of your peers. And I think that might be what starts this whole thing off, is teaching people the real basics. I found that a really powerful story when I heard it, and I've heard it many, many times.
I think what would be good to see is if it becomes part of an agenda to every meeting or certain meetings. So, people are very good at having perhaps a 5-minute morning meeting at work, or a half an hour, every few days, or an hour once a week where you all catch up. Whereas if you had like the first 5 minutes as you're welcoming and right, we're now going to have 5 minutes relaxation to start off. And then at the end, you have that 5 minutes to sort of, now we're going to relax, and you kind of, that little commute from that meeting to the next thing that you're getting on. I think that would be really good to be able to see, and very easy to implement if you had that lead there to do it.
Absolutely. Chris, did you want to add something, or no, you were fine?
No, I think that's great. I mean, I guess the danger is having like so many ideas. I guess each person, each company is going to have something that works. Like in our experience with this communications company, it's almost the challenge is there's no shortage of ideas. It's like, which one do you go for?
But I guess it's also finding out what works within different organizations as well. We've seen in our organization, there were quite a few of us that, wanted to steer this committee of wellbeing as well. So it just depends on how involved or not involved the actual employees are as well in the kind of direction that they're getting from the top management. There was another question about continuing to support each other as we come out of this pandemic, and how to move beyond the casual "how are you?" and just say "I'm fine." So how can we have those difficult conversations? What would be your tips?
If I go kick off on this one, because I kind of didn't bother with the last one particularly well. I completed my mental health first aid training not so long ago, and I suppose one thing I took from that was just having the conversation, like raising it, in getting over this idea that you might get this word wrong, or the unintended consequence of saying that might be this, or you can analyze into actually not doing anything. And I think my main takeaway is that probably most of us are coming from that with a good heart and like from a good place. So try and have the conversation, even if you're not sure exactly how it's going to go.
Lindsay?
I don't think I could have said it better than that. It's just starting it. It's just starting the conversation and realizing that we are all built the same way.
Yeah, and I would just add, there's been a huge amount of overwhelm, hasn't there, over the last year, and a huge amount of almost retraining and starting afresh or sorting things out to move forward. That whole recovery, the recovery plans or platforms that we're hearing about. So I think as well, it's being really honest with each other about where we're all at in these different stages, whether that's personally or professionally or both, especially as so many people are working from home still. So it does cross over very much. So being honest with yourself and with your company, people that you're working with, so that then you can all support each other and carry each other through where needed, because there's going to be some that are feeling stronger one day than another, and you all can lean on each other when required, if you're all quite aware of where each other's at as well.
Yep. That's great. I don't think there are any more questions, so I'm going to bring a close to this session, and I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Chris from InnerFit, Andrew from Now Pause, and Lindsay from Park Lane Events for making this event possible today. Your insights and contributions have been fascinating. And of course, to everyone who has joined us this morning. Our next session will take place on Tuesday, the 8th of June, and it will actually be live in our Assembly Hall. I'll be interviewing Dawn Loracombe and Claire Britcher from the British College of Aesthetic Medicine, or BCAM for short. Now, BCAM is a long-standing client of Church House Westminster over the many years. And in this interview, we'll explore how the association, who's also a not-for-profit registered charity, has evolved their membership and events over the last 15 months to provide better value to their members and to grow their association. And we'll notify you as soon as registration is live on Eventbrite. Thanks again to everybody and have a wonderful day.